But I also have tried not to take on the role of being the educator. So there certainly are some times where instead of me pausing to think, let me educate this person, where to be honest with you, that's when I've tried to go find another person of color, which can be difficult in some organizations, but somebody who I know will get it and who can relate and who I just need to take a minute and just, sort of vent before I try to reset.
Awesome. Oof. Oof. That's a lot. All right, Nez, I know you over there just biting at the bit. Girl, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's two things, but I'm gonna lead a little bit play off of what Erica just said. The I don't see color. Something that you said reminded me of something that I've had to deal with in the last few years in careers, working as, again, the public relations professional in a previous job. Someone saying, well, I don't know how to talk to them. Them meaning Black people. So here I am, your PR director. You're talking to me. How is talking to me any different than talking to the families of the students that we serve? How is talking to me any different than talking to parents, students, alumni, those kind of things? But something like that, how do I talk to them? I hope that as people who work in communications, I hope none of you have had to deal with that. There's one thing about knowing how to talk to your audience and who your audience is, but if the person that you are advising, that you are the leader for your communications department or staff or what have you, and a person of leadership says, I don't know how to talk to them, I honestly don't have any advice for that, because, even it caught me off guard, have to step back and say, well, what do you mean by them? And then you get into a situation, if you ask that kind of question, you could be taken as being aggressive or combative or rude or accusatory, right? Because you're trying to get to really, what is it that you mean? I'm not trying to pick a fight with you, but what do you mean by you don't know how to talk to them? You are a communicator, or I am telling you that, you know what your key points is. You're not speaking to someone in a different language. I'm not asking you to talk to someone in a different language, but it's something like that as a microaggression. It's like, I don't know how to talk to them. It's frustrating. Another microaggression, and I really am not making this up because it did impact my work at the time. I was working for a community college in a different city, not in St. Louis. And I was having a conversation with a dean about something that I was working on. And we were talking about work stuff. And then out of nowhere, this woman, who happens to be a white woman, asked me if I knew who my father was.
Oh.
Because I'm a Black woman and I was raised by a single parent. Y'all, I'm not lying. Like, I'm trying not to look at the chat.
I better
what?
mute myself. That's
what? So in my head, I was flipping out, like, what is happening here? But I took a moment and I swallowed my frustration, anger, surprise, whatever you want to call it, and politely said, yes, I do know who my father is, and our relationship is none of your business. I don't know what it has to do with this, but I am fully aware of who my father is, and my parents have been divorced since I was 4. But please explain to me why she thought that that was necessary. And she did go into some sort of diatribe about how so many Black people from single families don't know who their fathers are. So she just felt she had the need and the right to ask. That's a microaggression that really has no place in, to be asked regardless of what field you work in.
right.
But we're talking about people of color in communications, and that is a reality, that you will get asked something that has nothing to do with your work or your work ethic or your abilities. But if someone is thinking that about you in that moment, you have to believe they're thinking about you in that way all the time.
Right. Sean,
No,
what'd you
I
say?
gotta come into this one because here's Ness is exactly
Thanks,
right.
Nez.
And yes, no, going into family. So I'll tell you this: I'm not gonna name names. I won't name the employer in this one, but you guys can probably figure this one out too, though. But I mean, pretty much everybody can probably figure this one out. So, and Jack is laughing because I think he knows I'm about to come with this one. So there is a person that works in the PR world at a firm here in St. Louis, a white male. We worked together and on the other side of the other side of the communication thing. We were sitting in the newsroom one day, and there was a shooting, an incident over in East St. Louis, and this person sat up in the newsroom and said they need to drop a bomb on that whole place. And I stood up and looked at him and said, "My son lives over there. The mother of my child was over there. We weren't married at the time yet." I was like, he's like, well, "But Sean, you live over, but you live over." I said, yeah, I live on this side of the river, but my kid lives over there with his grandparents and his mom at the time. That's where they were living. I said, "So think about what you're saying. Well, I didn't mean you. Who did you mean then? Help me out there. Help me
Man,
out there."
you know, sometimes people do speak and put their foot in their mouth before they even have that opportunity to think about what they're saying. But it also, I always go back to this saying, and you know, to a certain extent, it holds some weight. You know, people show you who they are, and you should believe them. But I'm starting to wonder if it's just that saying is based off of some ignorance as well, because just because they show you does not mean that that's truly
No.
what they think.
And both of us work in the same building.
Yeah.
And what's happened here in the last year. When people
Yeah.
showing their true colors with regards to the mask mandate. And I will say this. My whole thing was when we had the mask mandate come down in our building here, you know, we had everybody was wearing whatever mask they wanted to wear. People wearing BLM masks, people wearing whatever. My boss, the CEO of the company, comes over to me and tells me after a conversation that we need to put a message out saying that people can't wear BLM masks, Confederate flags, this and that. And he goes, is that something we should do? I said, I don't really care, honestly, what they wear. I said, I'd rather somebody be wearing a Confederate mask and telling me who you are, so that way I can see you. Because the ones, and you all in this panel will know this and shake your head at the same time. The ones that we can't combat are the ones we can't see. The ones that we see coming, we got something for you. The ones we can't see, there's a problem there. And that was my issue with the whole, hey, wear a mask with a Confederate flag. Wear whatever you want. Show me who you are.
I agree to a certain extent. Some people do it because they follow. It's a lot of followers. And it's a lot of people based off of fear, like Ruthie mentioned in the chat. They do it because they're scared to stand up. They're scared to speak out. So let me just follow the crowd. I'll be a lemon. I'm going to jump off that cliff right behind you. But I can't believe that can be the whole mindset of some individuals just because, and I could be wrong. You know, I try to have a positive outlook on things sometimes. And, you know, you show me who you are, then yes. But I mean, and you speak and you treat me, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure other people have different opinions. Sam, what are yours?
So I want to just build off of what everybody's saying. I think another important piece to this conversation is, I would say, the opposite toxic problem. And I call that the savior or the friend of, or the co-signer. And what I mean by that, so this I find happens a little bit more in nonprofits. And this is very important in the PR field, because a lot of times non-people of color, or white people, I'm just being honest with you, non-people of color will see a moving story or moving documentary and think they understand all the problems that a specific race or gender or ability or LGBTQ has experienced, and maybe they're moved by that. Maybe they want to be a ally, but what ends up happening is it becomes offensive. It becomes oppressive. So I had a situation where I was working on a communication strategy for getting more minorities into the tech space. And I was explaining, I was like, you know, looking at the map of the city, I kind of mapped out how we could find people and how we could reach out to people. And instead of listening, somebody said, well, I watched this great documentary on Black people, and I think you find it really interesting. And I just listened. I'm like, okay, what's the documentary? I'm thinking, okay, maybe is it some part of Black history I wasn't familiar with? No, it was something about St. Louis history that I had already known and lived and experienced. And I say that to say we can get into very dangerous territories when people think because they watched a special, or maybe they got a minor in gender studies, and I'm saying this as somebody with a minor in gender studies, that they can elaborate or speak for a swath of people. I am not Latinx. I'm an advocate, I'm an ally, but I will speak to what I know. And if I don't know, I will point to somebody or refer to people. I have friends that are members of the LGBTQ community. I will speak to what I know. I will hand it off to the experts, but I think it's very dangerous in the communication space, especially that's also silencing us. You know, we don't need heroes. We just need a space at the table and we can speak for ourselves.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. Thank you all for sharing your opinions. At this point, I want to ask, are there any questions from the audience? I know we've been throwing out a lot of conversation out there right now, and it's been heating up. But if you have any questions, please share them in the chat. Please, you know, just if you wanted to raise your hand, I will recognize you and ask the question that you may have. But if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat.
Tamara, there's a question in the chat asking for Jack to react, to give his experience with microaggressions.
Definitely. Jack.
You know, Erica, when you were talking, and also when Nez was talking, I started thinking about that because the type of microaggressions and comments I always got was, and you kind of heard me allude to this earlier, was people saying, oh, wow, you know, you speak really well for an Asian, and or they use some other phrase or some other term. I think the best thing that I used to love seeing or getting a reaction to was if I were to call a restaurant to make a reservation, and if I say it too fast, they think my last name, instead of it being Wang, they hear Wayne, like Bruce Wayne or John Wayne. And then the surprise, kind of the look on their face when I show up to the restaurant for the reservation, and they're like, oh, sometimes that's all they say is, oh, or sometimes you could just tell by the reaction on their face. So for me, I get more of the whole, oh, you speak very well. Where are you from? Did you grow up here? Are you a US citizen? All that kind of stuff, which, like Nez was kind of saying, you know, that's kind of getting into family stuff where that's kind of like, you know, that's kind of none of your business. But I've always tried to take it as an opportunity to kind of educate them. Now, should I really have to go about educating them? Not really, but that's what I will do. I'll say, hey, I was born in Taipei, Taiwan. I came here when I was 4 years old. My parents, you know, retreated from mainland China to Taiwan because of the communist takeover, the nationalists and all that stuff. And we're democratic, we believe in democracy. So that's why we fled to Taiwan, all that stuff. And have to kind of give them a whole history lesson, and then how I got over here and all that, and why I came to the US and all that. So, you know, the older I get, I'm not saying I get more angry about it, but I get more kind of annoyed or perturbed about it. But it's like someone said in the comment, you know, oh, if you react where you kind of blow your top, whatever, then they're going to label you as an angry Black person or angry Asian. And, you know, then I'm sure I'll get that comment of, oh, I didn't realize you people can react that way, you know. And the older I get, the more I'm kind of like I guess I've become more outspoken. Because I will freely admit that a lot of a lot of folks in the Asian community are more conservative and more not wanting to put up a stink or raise heck. But I can tell by reading a lot of things, both online and just talking with younger generations of Asians, that they have and especially if they've grown up here in the US, that they've kind of decided that, kind of like to use the twisted sister thing, we're not going to take it anymore. And they will speak up a little bit more or be a little bit more outspoken. And I'm all for that, because I think at some point it becomes no longer a situation of educating somebody, but of instead righting a wrong, so to speak, in terms of calling you out for your microaggression or for your overt racist tone. So that's always what I felt and I've been impacted by, just like what I mentioned in the chat, in that in every newsroom I've been in, I was the only Asian on-air reporter. Like, people in the Asian communities of whichever community I was working in and whatever market I was working in, they were thrilled that they saw someone like themselves on the air. And so, I always feel it's very important to have that representation. And I think I saw a question in chat. Yeah. And with all the, aggressions against Asians over the last 18, 19 months, 2 years or what have you, my mom is more like, and she'll, I'll be honest when I say this, she'll be like, oh, no, don't react to that or don't defend that. And the older I get, the more and more I'm becoming more outspoken, to the point where, hey, I'm not going to put up with that. It goes back to what I said earlier. Underneath our skin, we are all the same. We're all human beings. And so just because you're a different color, creed, gender, what have you, does that mean anybody should be treated any differently? Maybe I'm, again, like I said earlier, maybe I'm being more naive about that, but I guess I try to be more optimistic than pessimistic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jack. And thanks to everybody, because this has been huge. This has been a lot to take in, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions that hopefully we can address before our time is up. We've already addressed the blatant discrimination conversation and whether or not we should speak up or shouldn't speak up, and who has and who hasn't, and feeling awkward in the sense when people ask us those awkward questions about our families that are none of their business. But I want to move into somewhat of a sort of a social political realm. We all have gone through the trials and turmoils of the Mike Brown and George Floyd situation. And I kind of wanted to get your take on, how do you think Mike Brown and or George Floyd's death impacted public relations and communications, the media itself? And do you feel that there was a difference between the two and their impact overall? So I'm gonna direct that towards Samantha.
So I'll say this. I want to take it a few steps back. I would say each incident, regardless of ethnicity, rings through PR and communication. We can take this all the way back to Rodney King. We can take this all the way back to Emmett Till. We can take it back to the Boston Tea Party if you want to. So I feel like we're very defined by social events, because there's two things. One is the reaction, right? When a situation first occurs, how are we going to handle that? How do we help our organizations find a way to navigate through that, right? And then the second piece is, I call it the healing piece of, okay, so now that we have this situation, how do we move forward? And then the third is pushing the ball forward. What I'll say is, what's pretty interesting is, during the time of George Floyd, we had trying to think of his name, I think it's McDonald up in Chicago. I was in Illinois when that occurred. And so when Mike Brown occurred, I was in Chicago. It was a ripple.
McDonald.
Laquan McDonald, there we go. So Laquan McDonald. So I staffed leadership that called on the chief of police to step down after that occurred. And so it was a day in, day out. It's like, I think the biggest thing as communicators, and I wish organizations understood this, especially as people of color, regardless of race, this is not just a task of something we have to write a press release on and we have to go into crisis communication mode. yes, we wear that hat and we are often the crisis communicators for our organizations, but we also are people and we also live that. And sometimes we may feel it and have it on our shoulders a little more than more people in the organization. And I felt that with Laquan. I felt that honestly, the most for me personally was Sandra Bland. And the reason why I say that is because she had a new job. She did pretty much everything was right. I think it was a minor traffic violation, supposedly, and she's no longer with us. And when I tell you, I think those are things that circle back in my mind in my current position, because in my current position, I staff half of Missouri and I have to drive through towns and cities at odd hours that are honestly not the safest for people of color and not the safest for women, and especially being a young female of color at night. No. So I think organizations need to understand that, one, your crisis communicator, especially if they're a person of color or a woman, we're not just dealing with this from, oh, this is another task or another fire we have to put out. So understand that, and also reach out to people and make sure they have the healing necessary. Understand that, be mindful of what you say, and we mentioned this several times of what people have said to us in organizations. To Sean's point about the bomb comment, after Mike Brown happened, I was in Illinois, people forgot that I was from St. Louis and made a similar comment. It was like, well, North St. Louis just need to be wiped off the map. And then Mike Brown would have never happened. And I was so traumatized by that because I was an intern and it was said by our director of communication. It was like, who do I go to? That's the person I would report an incident like that from. And it kind of set the tone. And I had to go to somebody and say, you know what, I can't handle this. I need to go home. And it was at a time when my parents were afraid of me coming home to check on them because of everything. So I know I'm kind of going roundabout way of answering it. It's just, some of these things are just every day. I hate to say it, I'm from St. Louis, North St. Louis originally. And for people who aren't on the call, North St. Louis is a little bit like Southside Chicago, if you're familiar with that, or some of the rougher boroughs in New York. It's every day for me. Mike Brown is a Monday. And that's an unfortunate reality, is like, I might, my parents always told me this as a woman and person of color, at 9 a.m. when I clock in, I might have problems you could never even dream of. In North St. Louis, a Mike Brown might be a Monday at 8 a.m. and you might know them. And then you have to come in and clock at 9 a.m. and you have to be cordial and make sure you're not too aggressive or combative. And then you have to hear about someone's tough weekend that probably was not on par with the weekend you had. So I say that to say, this is the unfortunate reality that a lot of us face. This is the unfortunate reality we face when we clock out. So just be mindful of that and just understand that it's important to take care of even your crisis communicators.
Amen, Sam. I know it. Erica, what'd you have to say?
So Sam took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to talk about, is recognizing that these things impact people of color in a very visceral way. I think for many people, I hope that those people who saw the video of George Floyd in particular, that they saw a human being, but as a Black person, we saw our brother and our dad and our uncle, and Black men saw themselves. And so it was very emotional. And I actually was asked, and the role I had at the time, this was a time where it was great to see so many allies stepping forward. We need those allies all the time. And I was asked in my role to our leader wanted to put a message out. And in this time where we greatly needed white allies, he asked me to write his message. And he, this was over an email. So luckily he was not there. And there was one other person of color on my team, and she happened to come into my office right after I got that email. And I'm just looking at the screen, looking at the email, and I just burst into tears. And it's not because I couldn't have written the message. It's carrying the weight of all of that, badly needing an ally. And then the person who could ally asking me to write the words. So I said no. And I said, this is a time where this really needs to be from your heart. I am happy to take your draft and, improve it, make it better. But I need this to come from you. And I think about one, just how incredibly taxing that was. Two, how lucky I was that there was one other person of color on my team who got it, who, could see the email and see me crying and understand it. I didn't need to explain it. But three, that I felt strong enough and empowered enough to say no, because there are people who are in positions for whatever reason in their situation that they can't say no. And they're dealing with this and also trying to write that message. And it can just be very emotionally draining. So I think while companies and crisis comms folks and philanthropic leaders are, throwing money at things and making statements, I cannot agree with Samantha more of making sure your employees are okay. And this is not just with the, George Floyd, this is with, as Jack was mentioning, the, severe uptick in Asian hate. It is, are you okay? Are you good? It's not going to the Asian person on the team and saying, I know there's lots of Asian hate going on. What can we do? I'm sure they want to be a part of the conversation, but it shouldn't be their weight to carry. And so I think it's just having awareness of how these things impact and sit with the people of color who work with you.
Yes, agreed. All across the board, agreed. I think it's Nez.
Yes.
Thank you,
So-
Erica.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. The question about Michael Brown and the impact of public relations, I'm going to bring this home to PRSA St. Louis and to STL. So the city of Ferguson, when Michael Brown was killed, did not have a PR person on staff. They did not have a paid employee to handle that. So I was asked, because again, I have connections there. I was asked, can you help? Can you help us find somebody to help? Because you can imagine they're getting phone calls from all over the world. Every day was elevated. Each day, things just got worse and worse and worse. Their spokesperson shouldn't have been the spokesperson, but that's another story for another day. So the city manager at the time, the city manager asked for my help. I had worked for him for just a little while. So what I did is I contacted people in PR in St. Louis that I thought maybe could be able to help with whatever it was they needed, or at least hear them out. Of the several people that I contacted, nobody wanted to touch that with a 10-foot pole. They needed help. They needed crisis help. They needed media relations help. They needed everything, but no one wanted to touch it. But the organization that did touch it is a small PR firm, a woman-owned business. At least called and said, she agreed to talk with them just to see what they needed and agreed to help with triage. And on the other side of that, I was seeing my friends who worked for that agency get vilified on social media because they happened to be white women trying to help the city of Ferguson, and a Black man had been killed. I can't argue against any of that, but what bothered me is that these people who I knew were trying to help, because others that I asked in PR, no, I'm not touching that. And these are people in St. Louis, not touching that. At the time, I was also serving on the board. Don't ask me what capacity, because I don't remember. That was in 2014 when Michael Brown was killed. Eventually, PRSA St. Louis, we did a programming session with a group called Diversity Awareness Partnership about how PR professionals in the future could respond to crisis situations like this. How can we help our colleagues in these situations that, need help? And how can we do that? As PR professionals, how can we step up to provide some sort of service? There was no answer. We got 5 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up. There was no answer. And I feel like that is the impact of public relations. How come we can't answer the call when someone else needs help? And I will also make this very relevant to today, that Kenosha, Wisconsin is on edge because Kyle Rittenhouse trial is going on. And if that trial does not turn out the way, well, let me take that back because that was me being biased. Whatever the results of that trial are, whoever that poor PR professional is in the city of Kenosha, Wisconsin, is going to need some help. And how will his or her PR colleagues in that area step up to help them?
Yeah.
And where's our responsibility as public relations professionals, regardless of how we feel about the situation? How can we help make things better?
I got you, girl.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap
Yeah.
things up over here with Sean. We have less than 4 minutes left in our session.
I'll do two, but anyway, so a couple things. Being a black male, what Erica said a minute ago was that, yes, being a black male, when I saw George Floyd's video, saw me there in that situation. I'm not going to go into my past situations of what I've dealt with, but that was very real, very raw emotion for me. Tamara, who works alongside me, saw me go through a lot of changes and just in this building, because the biggest thing with so when Michael Brown happened, I was over the TV side, and then I flipped over to this side of it. But I'm going to take you to where George Floyd. When George Floyd happened, that's when a lot of people were stuck at home, and so we had the pandemic. Everybody was on lockdown, so everybody was kind of forced to see. It was in their face. Aubrey happened a couple months before that. Kind of got brushed to the side a little bit, but then this happened. There was just more outrage. Juneteenth, I've celebrated my entire life. Now all of a sudden, it's at the forefront, and people are like, "Oh my God, we need to celebrate this day. We need to celebrate this day." And we used to joke around. Tamara and I used to joke around about this in the office all the time, that we just wanted a day, a month, a warm month that we could celebrate. But we basically want a day we can barbecue. And it was Juneteenth. Our CEO had no idea what Juneteenth was. This is pre George Floyd. This is way before George Floyd. Now when this comes to the forefront, he's like, we're all sitting here, okay, St. Louis County shuts down for Juneteenth. They acknowledge that. He tells me, well, maybe next year we can do that. And I'm like, no, not next year, now. The time is now for that. And he's like, well, it's going to take a special board action to make that happen and everything, and this and that. And I'm like, okay, why don't we make that happen? As a communications person, I'm like, people here want this done. Why don't we make that happen? Well, it's going to take it's going to take the board to do it. And then lo and behold, the board miraculously came through. And I'm not going to say what happened, but somebody was aware that we weren't getting that day off, and on the board, and made sure that they had a special board meeting through email and made a vote happen. And we have Juneteenth Day off ever since then. I'm just going to conclude with this. Nez brought this up. I have this this has been hanging outside my desk, my office, for the last 6 years. And I know it's hard for you guys to see. So anyway, it says, being a white ally, 4 steps to being a white ally. I'm not going to read all 4 steps, but the third step I'm going to point out here is, be okay with making mistakes and listen to experiences outside your racial identity and believe in them. As a white person on here on this panel, if you're listening to us, it's okay to make mistakes when you talk to us. Just acknowledge us and talk to us, and don't walk around eggshells when you talk to us. We have experiences, we want to share them as well. I'm just going to leave it at that you are more than welcome to ask us questions. I mean, my team here at MSD, I have a Middle Eastern on my team. I have a white male, I have a white female, and I have a black female, and then myself, a black male. We can't get more diverse in this district than that, period.
Thank you so much, Sean. This has been great, guys. I mean, I hope everybody who's been able to get on to this session and enjoy it just as much as we have. I appreciate all of you for taking part and participating and communicating and sharing your personal feelings on all of this. This has been huge. I also want to thank Jill and the Midwest Conference for allowing us to get on and express ourselves so openly and honestly within this session. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you guys have any questions, I believe there's a way to contact us through our PRSA St. Louis website page. If you want to reach out to us through that, if you want us to share this information again through another platform, I think we might be able to do that. I got to get with the people on here and find out, but we'll see. But thank you so much for being here and participating in our webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
You too.